Hey guys, let's get started for today. Now, before starting, I would like to take questions from yesterday. If anyone has any questions, any doubts, please let me know. We can go ahead, discuss about those, and then go ahead and start with today's content. Anybody has any question?
Hi, Vikas sir.
Yeah.
Sir, we create the users in so how to user login?
User logins via kubectl.
If I have shared, and how can share the credential for access the my Kubernetes
Okay.
terminal?
In case you are using a cloud service, okay, like AWS or anything like that, then there you will get IAM credentials. Okay, something like this. See here, you will get IAM credential like your username and password. So this is what you will get. And based on that, you will be able to log in. Generally, in most of the companies, they enable something called SSO, single sign-on. Means you log into the company's network and automatically you will be able to log into all the applications which the company is running.
And sir, yesterday we have created one user, right?
Dev user, yes.
How we can log in that user into Kubernetes?
We don't have that user as a login user and password. That kind of thing, it is not there. This particular user was only for this Minikube cluster which I created. So there is no specific username and password kind of thing. We just added him to the.
Then how do you find that this RBAC system is working or not? It is.
That's what I told. See, when you
log in and do the work on, you will come to know, right? Not indirectly, like
not exactly like that. See, generally what happens in a prod environment, okay, you will get something called SSO, single sign-on. Okay, single sign-on, what it will do is it will. So let me say I'm working for a company X. So my email ID is kumar.vikas@x.com. Okay, so using that credential only I will log in. The moment I log in, okay, with my name or with my user, whatever you say. So let me say. So let me say this is me, user, and my name is Vikas. Okay, so this user will be done a role binding BIN to a role, and the role is nothing but a set of permission. So when you log in, you don't have to do anything. You have to simply provide your credentials, Vikas, and whatever his password is. In the background, your admin has done a role binding of your username and password to this particular role. So whenever you log in, based on this, your API server will authenticate and authorize you to do the activity which you have to do. Okay.
So sir, in a local server, we can create the password for user.
See, creating user and password is a very complex thing on Kubernetes. Rather than creating user and password, we do in the way I showed you. Okay, rather than creating something like this, user and password, you should go with certificate and the other thing which we did is private key. So you can go with this SSL certificate and private key. So this is a better way of logging in, working in, particularly on Kubernetes environment, rather than saying username and password.
So by using certificate and private key, other user can also access.
One certificate is binded to one user only. So if you remember the commands which I was running yesterday, I generated, give me 1 second. See here, you are generating you are generating SSL certificate for one user, or the key for this user, which is 2048 byte encrypted. Okay, so using the SSL certificate, you generate the key and you have a CSR or a certificate. And then the common name or the name which you will call out is dev user, and he has access to a particular namespace. So this key whichever is getting generated, this certificate which is getting generated is only applicable for this user.
Which place they are generating? It is generating.
In the Minikube, in the cluster itself.
In which directory, sir?
Here, this .cube.
So we can extract these or export this certificate and key and give other
It is
user.
encrypted. It is encrypted. You cannot directly do that. The cluster will not allow you to do all these things. Even if you export or try to take it out from here, there will be a problem. It will not give you the exact value. It will only give you the encrypted value. So you have to decrypt. So that's a complex task. Generally, users don't do that.
So how to we give other user to access this Kubernetes?
You create another user.
Okay.
And give him access to whatever namespace you want. Generate a separate key for him. Yes. Generate a separate certificate to him. Once this user is created, go ahead and associate to a different role. So let me say I want to give him a admin kind of role. So give him an admin kind of role and then do a role binding so that both get attached to each other.
So sir, how can we share this certificate and key to
It is not shared. It is within that cluster. The user has been created only for the cluster. He is not a third-party user who can go anywhere and do anything. He is only and only for that cluster.
So, sir, if we give a user, how can user enter in our Kubernetes terminal? Because we are using in Minikube our root user, right?
So when I ran this command, kubectl config view, I showed you, right, that earlier when I just started my work, yes, I had only one user which was authenticated to do all the things here. But then when I added that user to my this thing, so as of now, if you come here, that yesterday one is already deleted. If you see here, this is the only user who is allowed here at this point of time, Minikube user, and he has a certificate and a key. Later, I showed you yesterday that when I go ahead with that user which I have created, I am able to add that guy also. So now that guy also is a valid user. So he will be also able to do whatever activities he want to do.
Sir, my question is, you are using this terminal, right? Okay. So you said me you created a user. So and user also use this terminal. So he can also perform the administrator activity.
No, he has not been given that role. He will do only those activity for which the role is allowed.
But
because can I answer it?
He is logging with root user.
No, he's not logging with root user. He is logging in, or see, when you create a user, okay, let me say this is your user. He has a SSL certificate. He has a private key. Okay. Now, when you go to API server, I told that authorization and authentication happens at two places. Valid user, yes or no. Yes or no. First. So valid user, yes or no. So with these things, he will come to know, yes, he's a valid user. Okay. Second authentication which happens is that what all power he has, means what all activity he can perform. that will only happen when you go to the role and the role binding.
Yes.
So in the role, I have told that he is only having reader role. So he will be only be able to read it. He will not be having any admin kind of role.
Yes, sir. But you are performing that time context, something context. So if there is not, he is not use context and perform the simple command.
You try
So
that. I'll give you, you try that. It will not work. Whatever context you give or whatever you give, okay, he will only be allowed to do the activities which is associated to him, okay, or which has been given to him. So this context thing which you're talking about.
yes,
See
sir.
here. You have told kubectl config set context for dev user context. He will be able to access my minikube in development namespace with the name as dev user. When I go to dev user, I see clearly he has this key, this certificate.
Right.
So he will never have root access. Nobody is giving him root access.
But sir,
any root access.
Sir, so my question is how to user login with username, because in Kubernetes
It does not
terminal.
happen that way. See clearly told it does not happen this way. I am not creating a username and password.
Right.
So why is the same question coming again? I
So
clearly
by certificate and private key, where is using certificate and private key? He is not using certificate and private key and
When
log in our terminal.
I showed you this. What do I mean by that? 1 second. When I show you this yesterday in the class, what do I mean by that?
Yes, we create the user and
okay.
So sir, you created the user, but in this terminal, you also perform this admin task and user task both.
User task and
asking
admin
how to
task.
access the terminal. He's asking how the new user.
The new
access the
user
terminal.
will not be able to access the terminal as a root user. A root user is a root user. Okay. Kubernetes, it does not happen like that. Okay.
Because 1 second, because I'll explain to him his clarifications. Okay, so this Vikas is confirmed already. IAM users credentials, right? IAM policies, right? Okay.
So actually, if he is talking about
Wait.
cloud server, but in local server, how to
in local server also? Wait. In the local server also. Local server also.
Actually, the local server get from the AWS only, right?
See, I'll tell him. Wait. Now, see, even if you create it at a local server, okay, when you create that, okay, let me say I'm just creating it. The moment you create it, you get root privilege. Okay. Suppose I'm installing Windows on my machine. When I install Windows on my laptop, I get root privilege. Then once I have the admin privilege or root privilege, then I create those users. Okay. But in Windows machine, you have username and password and you log in. But here, as of now, we don't have username and password. Okay. When I go to the console, I will show you how to create username and password and how to log in via console and via username and password. But when you come to kubectl, when you come to minikube, there is no username and password. There is a certificate and the user key. That's it.
Sir, so can you please show me user in minikube?
Minikube I don't have. I told you I will show it to you on console.
Yes, so in console.
So please wait. I will come to console where I show you how to log in via console. There I'll show you how to create a separate user.
Yes,
and
sir.
How to go ahead with that.
Right. I understand. So that certificate and key we shared the user and he install or his hard drive and then he will access by console,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Any more questions?
but sir, you are saying we can't import or
These are encrypted keys. You cannot. If you import, it will get corrupted.
so how to share this?
Why do you want to share it? I don't understand this. If you create, so let me say this is my AWS account. Hold on one second. This
Sir,
is
give me a second.
wait,
You
hold on,
said
hold on.
me. Yeah,
If this is my AWS account, I create a username here. Okay. I create a username here and the password here. Why will I take out this credentials and put it somewhere else?
you are talking about cloud, but
I'm
I'm
talking about in general. Suppose in my laptop, okay, in my laptop, I have a username and password. Now, this same username and password, why should I take it out and do somewhere else something? What sense it makes?
So you are not sharing certificate and
I told this user is for this particular cluster. Why is it so difficult to understand? This certificate, this user is for this cluster, the cluster which I'm showing you right now. Why do you want to take the certificate? It is illogical, right?
So my question is how to this user access this cluster?
And yesterday what I did, I showed you how he will access the cluster.
But you are mentioning their context and context, so user name.
Arey bhai, you
See, wait, hold on. Let me mute. See, I will take whatever your doubts are separately. We can't go like this, man. You're not willing to understand. Okay, so if you don't say that I want to understand, I can't help it. I'll take it separately. Give me some time for this. Okay, apart from that, anybody having any questions from the yesterday's class, whatever we did?
Because for the certification, do we have any validity for certificate?
Certifications come with validity. Generally, there will be 3 years of validity for the certificate which you do. And after 3 years, you have to go and revalidate that.
Okay, again, we need to generate again.
Yes.
Okay.
If you remember this user which I created yesterday, it has, so you say how much is the validity. So if you see here, I said days is 45. So I have 45 days validity for this user.
Okay. Okay, user validity, that is.
Yes. So user is associated to this key. So this key and all, everything will be valid along with that.
Okay.
And sir, in RBAC, we'll be creating only the access of the roles, right?
Roles is a set of permissions. Okay.
That permissions only we'll be creating in the RBAC, right?
Yes.
Okay, based on their role, whatever the privileges we want to give, that everything will be there in the RBAC.
Everything will be there in role. Okay. See, whatever permission you want to give, okay, whatever permission you want to give, you put it in the role. Okay. Then you create a user and you attach that to this role by role binding.
No, here there are 3 concepts. One is namespace that I understood, and then RBAC, and then role and role binding. This RBAC concept, where it will come?
RBAC is role-based access control. So based on the role, whatever set of permissions you have given, he will go in the cluster and he will be having those many power. Okay. Let me say in my laptop, okay, I log in as an administrator.
No. I know I work with this, but only the confusion for me is I am thinking that role and role binding is a different concept, and then RBAC is the different.
So RBAC is a combination of your namespace, role binding, user, SSL, everything.
Yeah, I got to know now. Okay.
Because this part like a role binding and RBAC concept, how we can handle in the ML file? So can you show like
how we can handle it on the
ML file?
YAML file. Okay.
Yeah.
See, the first thing what you do is you define the set of permissions. Okay. So here, if you see, I created something called pod reader role. So it's a role. So in the role, I'm saying that in the namespace development, I am giving you access to pod and pod logs. But for pod and pod logs, you can only get watch, list, and update them. You cannot create it. So this is the set of permission, and that too I have given only on the pod. Okay.
Yeah. These are all static values, is it?
Yes, these are the set of permissions or static values. Yes.
So we can get in the in the Kubernetes help like that, right? So this
is a YAML file only,
watch,
right?
list, update, the kind of.
If you want, you can give update, create, whatever permission you want to give, you can give.
No, just asking about like these values are static values only, right?
Yes, these are static values.
Yeah, thanks.
Once you give this set of roles, okay, these are permissions. These are some powers. Now, these permissions has to be associated with a user. So to associate that, you come up with this role binding. Where is this role binding? And in the role binding, you say there is a namespace development. There is a role with the name as pod reader. You associate it with dev user, dev user. So this is my user. This is my role. Associate both of them. And this is called as role binding.
Because one more thing, like, can you help me to do all these activities in the sequence, like how we are doing deployment, other services we are using, right? So irrespective of you just mentioning only one for particular this one. So we in the real time we are using all in together, right? So we are not using independent.
No, we don't do everything together. See, basically in real time environment, what you will do, I'll tell you. See here, this is a role, one role which I created, okay? And I said this is pod reader, okay? Similarly, you will create different type of roles, like there will be a guy with admin privilege. So let me say admin role. There will be a guy who will have deployment access. So we'll say deployment reader access or deployment creator access, something like this. So set of permissions. You will create n number of roles. Okay, roles is nothing but set of permissions, and then each permission will be allocated to the users or a group of users based on the requirement.
One more thing, is there like any service accounts will be there? Like so we are using like a default namespaces are there, right? So that kind of like service accounts are there.
So when you say service, it has a different meaning in Kubernetes. So when you say service account, it is nothing but a different namespace.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Hi, Vikas. Instead of using the YAML, we can use a JSON also, right? Can you?
Oh, no, you cannot use JSON. Kubernetes supports YAML.
It's only support like YAML only, right? Okay.
JSON I have not seen.
Okay, so fine.
So this three concepts, how important is for the DevOps engineer?
Not very much. It is no. See, there are CKA Kubernetes administrators. So they
this is all related to the admin.
Yes, this is mostly related to admin only. Okay. Now just
because one more thing, this one we can integrate like any external Active Directory kind of things.
Yes.
Or so we can use in the
architecture. If you remember, I told there is another API calls can be made. So by that also you can attach to some third-party tool like AD or Microsoft Active Directory or anything like that. This can be done.
Any example you can give, like anything you
see, I told you right in the beginning that we do a SSO, single sign-on. When we do a single sign-on, this is exactly what we do. We link everything together.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Now I'll mute everyone for another 20 minutes. I will teach. Then whatever questions are there, you put it on. Okay. Who was it? Wait a second. Yeah, go ahead, man. Whoever it was.
Vikas Munish here.
Yeah.
Okay. So now in this cluster side, right, or master node and worker nodes, right? So we are creating these roles, whatever it is, under master only, right?
Every management related work is master.
master node, right? Okay, after creating, we can test into the master node, everything is working fine. And same kind of whatever we are checking, right? Any worker node side also can be
worker node, you have something called proxy. Proxy,
okay.
this thing, you have the proxy network, right? That you can use, but for that you don't have to test anything. Simple access means you directly go there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now another 20 minutes I'll be teaching. In case there is a questions, you can just put it on the chat window. We can take it from there. Okay, so what we will be doing now is we will be talking about something called services. Now, what is a service? So basically what happens, let me come here, service. So basically, let me say, I just say service in Kubernetes. What do you mean by when I say service in Kubernetes? So this is my service in Kubernetes. Okay, let me just come to a diagram first and then come here. So basically what happens whenever you are running a setup, let me say this is node 1, this is node 2, you have pod, you have a port number, everything is there, okay? You have your replica set, deployment, but whatever is running is always running within the cluster. Okay, it is internal to the Kubernetes environment. But many a times there will be a requirement that whatever you are running within the cluster, you want to expose it to the outside world. If you remember, when we were talking about Docker, we told -p for the port, and we were doing something called port forwarding. Means we said that it will be accessible from outside world. So my service will do exactly same thing. So a service is associated to the pod, and it acts or it does two things. One, it will manage the outside traffic, or it will open these containers to the outside world. And second, it will act as a load balancer. Means whatever traffic is coming from the outside world, it will see which pod is free. Then with the help of my master node, it will decide where the traffic should go, and it will distribute the traffic. So anytime when you say what is a service, so service is a component in AWS which will expose your Kubernetes containers or Kubernetes pods or the containers which are running inside the pod to outside world. Because many a times it is required that whatever I'm running, it should be accessible from outside also. Now, second is that whatever traffic, so it is not a one-way communication, right? It's a two-way communication. So let me say some traffic is coming from the outside world. So this service also acts like a load balancer, and it distributes the load which is there among the pods. So let me give you an example. So let me say I have a 3-tier application like Amazon, some application, okay? There is a first layer, or the outmost layer is web. Then the second layer is my middle layer. And the third is DB or database. Now, if the database is not having access to the outside world and all the three are running in my container, let me say different pod. This is pod 1, pod 2, pod 3. You can also say this is different node, different namespace. All those things, combinations are okay. But the most important thing here is whatever is running within the Kubernetes cluster, and within the Kubernetes cluster. But when you say web, it should have access to the outside world. Basically, it should have access to internet. And two-way means it should be able to go outside, and the outside traffic should be able to come inside. So this application needs to be exposed to outside world. And this exposure will be done via service. Now, these two are internal service. Even if you don't expose and just establish a connectivity between both of them, it is okay. Okay. So in short, if I have to say service, so I will simply come here and say, 1 second. Second, let me go back to the definition of service. So it says it's an abstract way to expose an application which is running in the set of pods. Basically, it is running in the container. So which are running in the set of pods as a network service. So you expose your you expose your application to the outside world. With Kubernetes, you do not modify your application. Means at application level, you don't make any change, but you introduce the mechanism of service. Kubernetes gives the pod their own IP address and a single DNS name for the pod, and then you can load balance them and expose them through service. So service is what is going to expose my content to outside world and allow the outside traffic to come inside. And when it is coming inside, my service will act as a load balancer and it will distribute the traffic among the worker nodes. Now, when I come back to service, this is how my service will look like. So if you talk about the types of service, there are basically 4 types of service: cluster IP, node port, load balancer, and external name. Now, external name is kind of not being used. It is more of a proxy server where you know the IP address of the worker node, and via your proxy server, you directly try to connect to your worker node. It is dangerous, okay, because you are bypassing everything and directly trying to connect. So most of the applications, 99.9% of the applications will not try to go or use this channel because it is prone to hack and all those things. So people don't encourage this, but to many places you will read only 3 types of services are there, but actually it is 4. The external name, where you have the DNS CNAME, means you exactly know the IP address of your pod and you directly try to access the pod by using proxy server, which is there in your pod. So we will discuss about this later. As of now, we will consider these 3 guys. So if you see here, the first one is cluster IP. Now, what is cluster IP? Now, cluster IP is the local Kubernetes DNS, or more importantly, it is an internal service. What do you mean by internal service? In my diagram, I showed you that there is a middle layer and there is a DB. So middle layer and DB can talk to each other. They don't want to be exposed to the outside world. Within pod, exposure is okay, but they don't want to be exposed to the outside world. So in that case, you use something called cluster IP. Now, if I come back here in this thing and I say kubectl get all, okay, you will see all the things. As of now, I don't have anything. I only have one service, which is the default service, and it is typed as cluster IP. And if you see here, external IP, none. So basically it is an internal communication. All the internal communications are done by using cluster IP. This is also the default one. Okay. If you want to only see the services, you can say kubectl get service, or the short form is SVC. So you can see the service. As of now, I have only one service, which is the default one. So what I will do is I will create a service, but the type will be cluster IP and it will be the default one. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to come here to my documentation. And here I have something called cluster IP service. Let me take this, copy this entire content, come here, paste it here. So I will say it is YAML. We come here, say it is YAML. And I will explain this. Give me 1 minute. So generally what you do is, if you have 2 contents, like this is service and this is deployment. If you want to keep both in the same file, it is possible. The 2 content can be separated by 3x dash. So 3x dash means a new content is coming up. If you don't want, keep it separate in 2 different files. But if you want to keep it in the same file, use this 3x dash. This thing you already know, apps v1, it's a deployment. In the deployment, you're giving a name to this Nginx server and you're giving a label. Now this label is important because with this label only, the deployment will link itself to the replica set. In the replica set also, you see the label is there. This label will link my replica set and my pod, and inside the pod container is running. So if I see here, my deployment, my replica set and my pod, all the 3 of them are getting linked by this particular keyword or this particular label. Then in the specification, I'm mentioning the replica is 3. Again, you tell how many replicas you want. The selector match label is front end, which matches this guy. In the metadata pod also, I'm saying this thing. This again matches. In the specification of container, I'm running Nginx latest image at port number 80. So this deployment thing you already know. There's nothing changing here. What is changing? So this guy is changing. What is this? API version is v1. Kind is service. And the metadata is a name. You give any name of your choice. Nginx service, Nginx 1, 2, 3, whatever you want, you give. Then in the specification section, this is important. Now, I told cluster IP is the default one. So even if you don't mention, by default, it will take cluster IP. But it is good if you mention the cluster IP. Okay. Then selector app. So this app front end is important. Then only it will come to know, okay, this deployment is related with this service. Then only it will come to know with this app label. Here, selector app front end. Now it is saying TCP is the protocol. Internally, it will run at 8080 and target port or the outside port is also 8080. Though it will not work outside, but it will be 8080. So now let me run this and I'll come back to this again. So let me copy this, come back to my shell, and here I'll say nano cluster IP dot YAML. Paste whatever you have. Okay, Control X, Y, enter, and come here and say kubectl apply -f, and you have this cluster IP dot YAML. So it says there is a service which has been created with the name as Nginx service, and there is a deployment which has been created with the name as Nginx server. So if I come here and say kubectl get all, I can see this deployment got created. Inside this deployment, this replica set got created and 3 pods got created. This is okay. I know all these things. But the new thing which came here is this service. And the name of the service is Nginx service. I can see the type is cluster IP. It has a particular port number, but the external IP is 0. Means if you want to access it externally, it is not possible. Okay. So this cluster IP is generally used for internal communication. Within the cluster, if you want to communicate, you can communicate using internal IP or cluster IP, the default one. But there can be a requirement where it says that, no, you told service, and service is meant for external communication, not for internal communication. So in that case, I will go to my second type of service, which is node port. So here it says worker node IP address followed by the port number, whatever port number you get, and you will be able to expose it. So let me say, I want to expose what is running here. So if you remember your container, internal port, external port, and this is the pod port number, or we also say target port. So this is container level. 80 is container level, because if you remember, when we were talking about containers, we used to do something like this, right? 1 second. Give me 1 second. So we were doing something like this, right? Docker run -p, and we used to give 80 as the external port. This. So this something like this we used to do, right? So the same is visible here. Container internal port, container external port, and this is known as my pod port number. Okay, so let me see how it works. How to see it? Come here. This time let's go to node port and copy this content. Come back here. Now this deployment is as it is. It is not going to change. Nothing changes in the deployment section. But here there is something which is changing. Here I'm saying this is service. The name I have given as Nginx service node port. And here I have precisely mentioned that the type is node port, selector is front end, same. But here if you see, the node port IP address has been mentioned and the IP is 30.300.99. Means I want to expose this content which is running inside the container, inside the pod, but at port number 300.99. Okay. You can run the entire thing. You can run the entire thing. Come here, say nano. This time I will say node port dot YAML. Paste here. Okay. Control X, Y, enter. Now if I want to run it, kubectl kubectl apply -f and this node port dot YAML. So if you see here, the deployment is as it is. So it says deployment is unchanged, but the service has been created. And the name of the service is Nginx service node port. So if I come here and say kubectl get. Okay. So if you see carefully, let me clear everything. Kubectl get all. So I can see the pods are running like how it was running earlier. No change here. Deployment is also no change. Replica set no change. What has changed? This guy has changed. Service is Nginx service node port. The type is node port. It is running at this IP address. And this is the external IP or the node port 300. Now I want to see whether it is running or not. So let me come here to the plus button, click on this HTTP port on 30,000. So my port number is 30099. Display. And you can see, welcome to Nginx. If you see this page, Nginx web server is successfully installed and working. In my container also, in my pod, I can see this is running. So if you want to go inside, copy kubectl describe pod, describe, paste. You can see here container, the images Nginx. Now you will say, no, I don't believe it. Let me run it on some other port number. This one we were running on 30099, right? Let me run something on like here, display port. And see here, we are currently trying to connect on this particular port. The service can take some time, even up to 5 minutes. Basically, it is not running. That's why we are not able to see. Now, the question comes, you have an internal, how are you defining external port number? I'll come to this. So now the question comes that you are going ahead and defining a port number. Where is this port number coming from? So I will simply come here and say node port range. So you can see here, you can go ahead and define anything between this range, 30,000 to 32,768. Anything but between this range only. Okay. So if you give any port number within this range, it will expose your application to that particular port number. So if you see my YAML file, I told that this application should be exposed via node port and it should run at 30099 port number. Okay, and hence it is running here. Now, this can be taken as a good thing. Also, this can be taken as a limitation. Now, let me say I am trying to run an application and always I have to stick to this range, but I don't want to stick to this range. I want to be like any random port can be allocated to me. I don't want to stick to this range. Okay, so what should I do? So I should go ahead and go to the next guy, which is, let me come to this guy. So node port is doing good. Okay, node port is doing good. But the problem here is that the range of the port is limited. So I want to put it as a load balancer. When I put it as a load balancer, I can integrate it with my cloud technology like AWS and GCP. So whenever you run it at a cloud platform, you run it as. So whenever you run at a cloud platform, you run it as a load balancer. And in the load balancer, there is no requirement of the port, or you bind the port, nothing like that. Randomly, a port will be generated. Let me show you that. Wait, the security and all I'll come, the port number and the security I'll come. Just give me some time for that. Clear. So whatever I have till now, I'm just going to delete it, okay? ls minus l. So I have kubectl, delete, del, delete minus f. Okay, and kubectl, delete this node, delete minus f. Okay, so I have deleted everything. If I come here and say kubectl get all, I will not be able to see anything. I have deleted everything. Now this time I am introducing a new variety, which is my load balancer. And this gives me a wide range of IP addresses and the port number. And it is not limited to a range. Any port number can be allocated here. Okay, so let me just go here. Load balancer. Take this content. Let me remove all these things which is not needed. Okay. So this is my deployment. Nothing much to be done here. I'll just change the image here. I want to run the latest image. Okay. So this is my deployment. The main thing will come here. Service. I've given the name of the service as my service. And the app label is Nginx app. So it should match here. Nginx app. So it is matching. Then in the selector section, I have told it is type as load balancer. The node port is 31,000. Okay. If you give 31,000, it will bind itself to 31,000. If you don't give anything here, if you simply skip this step, it will randomly allocate one IP address or a port number. So let me just show you that. So let me go and say nano load balancer dot YAML. Okay, paste the content, whatever I have. Control X, Y, enter. Now go ahead and say kubectl apply minus F and this load balancer. So you can see a deployment and a service has been created. Now, if I go and expand this service, kubectl get all. So you can see a new service has been created with the variety as load balancer and a random port number has been allocated. So both options are available. So I will say load balancer is an extension of node port. Node port has two limitations. Node port has a range of IP address and you have to mention within that range. In load balancer, you do not have to mention the range. If you mention, it is good, but that is not mandatory for you to mention the range, and it is compatible with all the cloud providers. Okay, so it runs at 32378. Come here, come here. 32378. Display the port number. And you can see this is running at 32378. Now, there is one major problem with this setup. Okay, you are exposing the content. No, minus F is for file. It is not force. In kubectl, minus F is for file. Now, there is a major problem with this. So what I'm trying to do is I'm giving the port number. So basically, you are trying to expose this something like this. IP address. Wait, let me show it here. See here. if you're seeing this node port or cloud provider ELB, you are not using a HTTPS address, worker node IP address followed by code port number. So your URL is something like this: 172.67.88.132:3123. So you are exposing it like this. So when you expose it like this, this is not the right way. Just because I had to expose, I have exposed it. But security wise, it is not correct. It is not a good way of exposing your content to the outside world. So there will be a next topic related to this, which is ingress. Ingress. Okay. So ingress is a channel in Kubernetes which manages the external access of the service, and it does it in the safe way. Okay. So with all SSL certificate and all those things will be there. So I will teach you ingress in the coming class. But for today, let me revise whatever we have done, and then I will take questions from here. Load balancer will also take the same port range. No, Malti, it is not important or it is not mandatory for my load balancer to take that range only. It can take anything from 0 to 65657. So this is the range. It can take any port number, whichever is available. It can take any port number. I think one more is there, 656567. This is the port range. So it can take anything from that range. So it is not at all important for it to take this particular range. So what did we discuss today? So we discussed that whenever we are running an application in a Kubernetes cluster, it is always running internally. You see the IP address, port number, everything is okay, but always it is running internally. Means you can access it within the cluster, or you have to go inside the cluster and access the content. Okay. In case you don't want to go inside and access the content, you want to expose it to the outside world, you have something called service. Service is of three types. Services of two types, internal and external. When I say internal service, I'm talking about cluster IP, which is the default one. When I talk about the external, I have node port and load balancer. Node port will expose your content to the outside world, but there is a range of IP address and you have to stick to that range. But if you're working with a cloud provider and you do not want that range, you can go to load balancer. But load balancer and node port are doing the same thing. Then once the content is exposed to the outside world, I can access it. But still, the way I'm accessing is not the right way, because I still have that problem. The access is being done by like this: worker node IP address : the port number, which is not the right way. So to make it right, I will use something called ingress. Okay. So ingress is the next topic, but that will come later. This external name, I'm leaving it for time being. Later, I'll come to this and explain about this. So this is what we have done: load balancing and exposing it to the outside world. Now I'll open it for questions. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead. Can you please overview the things which we did as a date? That which tool do we want? A single sentence. Again, it will depend, right? What kind of work you're doing. If you want for internal access only, then use cluster IP. If you want to expose it to the outside world, use node port or load balancer. Load balancer works good when you're working with a cloud provider like AWS or GCP. But if you are working with on-prem application, then you are using node port.
Because hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, because regarding this node port is defined as for the external users to connect to the ports, right? So
rather you say the other way around, for your applications to get exposed to the outside world.
Okay, yeah. So in the terms of diagram, so 80 is defined as internal port. So 80 for the pod and 8080 is for the container. Like how this?
Yes. So this is container the internal port. This is container external port, and this is my node port. Or pod port number, you can say.
Pod port. Okay.
Here it is. They are mentioned. Container port, containers external port, pod IP address, target port or your pod's pod's port number, and this is your node IP address. So there are levels of.
And if we align one port for cluster IP and other one port for node port and other two we assign cluster IP. So it is possible.
Yes, everything is possible. You can give it a try. Everything is possible. When you log in as a root user, all these combinations can be done.
And sir, these three ports are connected each other or not? Or
I
if
told
we
you the
have
first
to-
class, all the pods are connected to each other. When you say cluster, it's a combination of master and worker node. So everything is connected.
If we define the namespace, so then after it is connected or not?
I told it yesterday, no? Namespace is an isolated environment. Ideally, it should not be. But in case you want, yes, you can do it.
Okay, if we define the namespace, so they can't ping to each other.
The question to you is, why do we create a namespace? You tell me first.
For different identity and separate the
So,
like we want to.
If they are different identity, they are separate, then why would I like to connect them?
So database we have to keep separate, right?
That is a different concept. Database I have not touched upon. Database is stateful set. You leave that. In my question is, if I have created a namespace to separate each one of them. Now, why are you putting everything together? There's no reason for that.
Yes.
And yes, if you want, you can do. That is the answer to this.
Thank you.
Okay, fine. See you then, guys. We'll meet tomorrow. Monday, I said. See you then. Bye-bye.
So take my question now.